Welcome back to the Pig Trail Show. We're joined, as always, by our Hoops insider, Kevin McPherson. Kevin, we have a lot to talk about this week in the world of Hog Hoops, but let's start off with the buzz topic right now, which is Ron Holland, 5-star, who just decommitted from Texas, at the end of April? And everybody at Arkansas is talking about him right now.
Yeah, it's a buzz topic for sure. And this is the number one player in the country, by the way, Courtney. 247 Sports updated its rankings just a few days ago, and he's moved up. He was already a top 5 consensus guy, but number one, this is almost identical to what happened for Nick Smith Jr. last year. At this time, Nick 247 Sports updated, brought him up to number one, consensus top 3 guy when you looked at all the services, but number one in 247. Could there be a parallel here, not only in the ranking, but with Ron Holland then playing his freshman season at Arkansas? I know that's a giant tease right there. We don't have anything firm to give you on that because he's still waiting. I'm told on his release from his national letter of intent that he signed with Texas in the early period, and so formally schools cannot be recruiting him. He's also was considering G League Ignite at the time. One of his last four, his final 4 options when he picked. Really, it came down to Texas and Arkansas. When he chose the Longhorns, he was already looking at pro opportunities. That's on the table again. I'm also told perhaps the Australian League, where you see these young players come out of high school from the United States, go over there for a year before they can jump in the draft. The NBL, the National Basketball League over in Australia, is also going to be in pursuit here. But here's the interesting thing: Holland doesn't need a release from that letter of intent to go pro
Yeah.
in either the G League or so. Even though those may be considerations, if it was something he was dead set on doing, he could have done that immediately or at the same time he decommitted from Texas. And we've seen players go that route and typically announce right on the heels of, if not at that same time. And so I think it makes it very interesting that he's looking at his college options, and that's where I really love Arkansas's chances. But we'll see. We need to see this thing play out again. Just kind of going through some of this. When a player requests a release from a signed letter of intent, there's a process, and the school has a certain amount of time, about a 30-day window, that before the player can go another way to try to get out of that letter of intent, which would be applying through the NCAA. So he's got to wait until Texas does it. Now, most schools these days grant those releases. In the old days, they might not. But this is more and more a free agency level of college basketball, more and more of a play for play because of NIL. And so it's really bad optics for any school to hold a player back that doesn't want to be there. There was a coaching change there. There's legitimate we know that. So there are legitimate reasons for this young man to want out. Now, he's also left the door open for a possible return to Texas. Don't ask me to explain that. But Ron Holland is the hot name right now. He is not only a 5-star, he's the number one player in the land. I love his next level potential. When I'm talking not just college, but the NBA, here's a player that makes an impact at both ends because he not only plays hard, but a determination to win every possession. That part of it reminds me of Jalen Williams,
Yeah.
who, we know what he did at Arkansas and what he's done as a rookie in the NBA, but a guy that wants to win every play and has the savvy and the gut to go out there and fight to win plays. And so Ron Holland's that kind of guy. Totally different player in terms of position, athleticism, size, and those things. But I like that similarity. And there's other guys Arkansas had in the past, but you always want to build with a guy like that. And it's extra sweet if it's a number one player in the country. So let's see how it plays out. Whoever's getting Ron Holland, whether it's college or a year at some pro level before the NBA draft, is getting what I think projects long term is an outstanding 3-and-D wing at the NBA level. But that's just one player. Arkansas has 2 scholarships available right now, Courtney. The departures of Barry Dunning Jr. and then Darian Ford to the transfer portal created those 2 slots. So after Arkansas rung up 5 commitments out of the portal in early to mid-April, but a 14-day period there, they filled up. They were back to the number. We know they've got 5 players in this current draft.
And Kevin, we are going to talk about those guys in just a second. But before we do that, let's talk about the transfer portal a little bit more because Arkansas has been hitting it hard this offseason. Of course, Muss and his staff always do so. Grant Nelson is a guy you wanted to bring up because he hit the portal pretty recently, right?
Yeah, five pledges, 5 commitments. in April. We know last year Arkansas got Ricky Council later after getting those four frontliners right after the season ended. So Grant Nelson could factor in a way similarly if he chooses to go the college route. He not only jumped in the portal, Courtney, in this busy last week, as far as things that are shaking around in college basketball. Not only did he jump in the portal, but he's been in the NBA draft pool, and so I'm told he's going to explore that and see where that goes for him. I'm also told he's been invited to the combine, so that obviously means if that's the case, he's going to want to take full advantage of that opportunity, possibly get individual workouts with teams. And because he got in the portal just recently, it means that where's he going to find time to take visits to school? So I think maybe the college decision could be on hold while he figures out this pro possibilities, except that at any point where a player gets feedback to go in one direction or the other, we could hear something definitive. But it may actually play out through the rest of the month because we know the combine starts next week. The deadline to withdraw from the draft is May 31st. And so anything can happen between now and then, but it may be a wait and see process. 6'11 forward, very versatile, skilled guy, can handle the ball on the perimeter, can shoot from the perimeter, can take his defender down from the perimeter off the bounce, turn himself into a post player. Most bigs that are adept at playing down low need help. They need a guard to get it to him on time and on target. This is a guy that can create all of that. So I'm not going to call him fully a unicorn at the college level, but he's a really good basketball player. When you look at his statistically, 17, 18 points a game at North Dakota State, over 9 rebounds, nearly 2 blocks a game. So here's a guy that's got size, length at 6'11, but skill. A lot of colleges would love for him to decide to stay in school. I think Arkansas is in great shape in that running if he decides that college is the way he wants to go and make a return.
I'm glad you brought up the combine, Kevin, because we want to talk about some of the hogs that were invited to the combine, and we want to give an update on possibly one of those guys too, Jordan Walsh and Devo Davis. I know a lot of fans are like, what are they going to do? The clock is ticking. That deadline is coming up. So what do you think about those two guys? And talk a little bit about the combine, if any of those guys were invited to the NBA combine.
Well, this is a perfect segue. You nailed the talking points that we need to go through, and I'm glad you did. The NBA has not their channels for putting out who's been invited. That hasn't all been released. But 4 Arkansas Razorbacks are going to go to are invited to the combine. Will go to the combine, and they'll have varying degrees of participation because there's competitive 5-on-5. There's there's the measurables they go through with height, standing reach, all that. They'll weigh them. They'll go through medical stuff. They'll go through agility testing. They'll go through interview processes with teams. So it's kind of like a buffet. Players will pick and choose based on what they're told is best for them to do during this combine. But 4 hogs are going: Nick Smith Jr., Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, Ricky Council the fourth. And so I mentioned, Grant Nelson being one of those guys in there. So there's going to be some more wait and see, possibly with 2, because we know Smith, Black, and Council intend to stay in professional, their professional pursuits. All 3 of those guys should get drafted. They're projected to. Jordan Walsh and Devo Davis are the guys that left the door open. And, I've been saying for a while, I said for a long time that it looked like both of those guys were likely to stay in to pursue those professional options, whether it's NBA or other options. As we get closer to it, as we move along right now, I really think with Walsh, I still personally believe he's probably leaning towards staying in. What he does in combine and individual workouts with teams are going to have the greatest impact on a decision. So we still haven't gotten there. But if it had to be decided now, I think he'd still stay in. But I'm hearing from a couple of sources in the last 3 days, 2 different sources who I consider reliable, who both said they think it's 50-50. So they weren't just saying that just to be fence riders. I think they believe that. So that's a greater chance than even I thought. Devo Davis, I've been saying more recently that I think there's a real good chance he returns to Arkansas. I put that at 55-45.
Okay.
But I think that's a pretty good swing from it being the other way, or even greater than that for him staying in the pro part of, option. So I think as it moves, there's a good chance Devo Davis comes back. Now there's always something that could happen between now when we finish this segment and a few minutes later or tomorrow, the next day, or sometime after that, with a no opportunity for the pro level. And sometimes there are factors at play that weigh into decision making. NIL can also be part of that. Just keep that in mind as well as these players weigh this stuff. But at the end of this, whether it's Grant Nelson out of the portal or another player, Arkansas is working other options there. Some level of retention, whether it's one or two guys coming back, and then potentially a Ron Holland to kind of wrap that. I think Arkansas, because they have two openings, they're going to land with two more additions by some combination of that, possibly three. And
Ooh.
that's where things could get interesting, but we'll see how it all goes. It
Ooh.
shakes out.
That's a big tease. I mean, I know a lot of Hog fans are like, what is happening? What is going on? But hey, that deadline is rapidly approaching. So I'm sure we'll find something out sooner rather than later on those guys, you think?
Well, it's relative. I mean, today's
Yeah.
what, the 7th?
Yeah, the
The
seventh.
31st, 24 more days. To me, that's not that long. But, for the average fan, it's fast food delivery, man.
Yeah.
You call Uber Eats, you want it at your door, in a jiffy. So
Yes.
nobody wants to wait around anymore to find out good news, bad news, or indifferent. They want to know now. Can't quite go there. I do love Arkansas's chances with Ron Holland. And I feel like, he's got a process to go through.
Yeah.
That letter of intent, while he's still with Texas, it prohibits schools from formally recruiting him. And so, the pro options are there for him at any time. Let's see what he does. He still made no announcement in that regard. Not much he can really say. While he's still a Texas Longhorn until that release.
Well, Kevin, it doesn't permit or prohibit Anthony Black from trying to recruit him, you know? he's he's over
Hey,
here
these guys are
retweeting stuff and making sure he's trying to get him to come, you know?
no doubt about it. Those guys were teammates at Duncanville in
Yeah.
Black's senior season. Holland was a junior. They won a state title together. There's connections with Jordan Walsh and these are Dallas area guys to begin with. But Jordan Walsh and Holland played together spring and summer, 2 spring and summers ago with Drive Nation down in the Dallas area. So there's connections. And look, if Arkansas got him, several things. That would be back-to-back years Arkansas got 5-star players from the state of Texas, right? So that'd be 3 out of the last 4 or 5 stars that Arkansas has gotten from that state. Also, when you look at Bay Fall and Ron Holland being McDonald's All-Americans last year, Bay Fall, the 6'11" early period signee for the Razorbacks, it would give Arkansas back-to-back years of having multiple McDonald's All-Americans play their freshman season as Hogs. It'd be 5 spanning those 2 years. So that would be a first in program history. So when you're recruiting well and the results show up on the court, you continue to recruit well. One of the nice problems to have as a coaching staff, if you're Eric Musselman, is this time of year when you're looking at deadlines for players to go in the portal and deadlines to jump out of the draft. Arkansas is one of the few teams that has all this stuff going on right now. Most of the other teams are wishing they had players good enough to be considered to be drafted and have multiple. I mean, you feed off of that and you build off of it. And so Art Musselman's done a great job of balancing portal and high school recruiting. And if you get Ron Holland in back-to-back years with the number 1 player in the country, this is just another marker for the Razorbacks program, the men's basketball program, where they can, kind of taunt and tease the blue bloods out there.
Yeah.
They're breathing the same air all of a sudden, right?
Oh, for sure. And there's one thing I know when fans, they get excited on social media and all those things. Musselman knows what he's doing. He's been working the portal. He's been doing exactly what he needs to do to set him up and this team up and this program up for success next year. So I trust him must. That's a phrase I use all the time. Trust him must, because he knows what he's doing. Before we let you go, Kevin, we are running out of time, but do want to
Yeah.
talk about a guy that has kind of flown under the radar a bit, and he's from this area, Springdale, and 2025 guard in Isaiah Seeley. Can you talk about him a little bit on the show?
6'5", pushing 6'6", big guard. I've seen him play for, going on between 2 and 3 years now. Young player, obviously class of 2025. But here's a young man that he's been to he went to a couple of games this year, not unofficial visits, but attended Arkansas games. He's right there in the backyard in Springdale. ESPN recently put out its updated rankings for the class of 2025. They expanded them, but he's in the top 30. He comes in at number 29, according to ESPN, in that
Wow.
2025 class. Terrion Burgess, who has an Arkansas offer, the 6'9" wing out of Central Arkansas, out of Benton. We've talked so much about him, and rightfully so. Arkansas has been recruiting him, has the offer out, but they're also recruiting Isaiah Sealy. And both of these guys, I mean, both of them are in that 25 to 30 range when you look at ESPN's rankings. Burgess is top 20 when you look at 247 Sports. But Sealy's a young man that's making a name for himself, playing on one of the prestigious grassroots team, Mocan Elite, which is in the Kansas City area, based out of, but that's not far from Northwest Arkansas. But they play on the Nike EYBL and E16 circuits. So he's playing on one of the on arguably the top circuit. And as a big guard, he's versatile. He can play the one, the two, can defend multiple positions. And I love his basketball IQ, and his ability at his size at such a young age to not only see the floor but make the right reads and play an unselfish brand and have a big impact.
Thanks so much for joining us on the show today, Kevin. We always appreciate having you on, and we'll have much more Pig Trail coming up after the break. Stay with us.